Welcome guys, today we're talking about pinning units in combat. Now this is an absolutely essential move if you want to be good at 40k. Now, it's a basic move, there's only one way of doing it right, there's a whole heap of ways of doing it wrong. We're going to explore that and then we're going to be talking about how you can counter it. So, enjoy the video guys. Welcome guys, it's Andy here from D6 Evolution, and today we're talking about pinning units in combat. Now guys, this is one of my absolute favourite tricks that you can do in 40k, and it's essential to a lot of the more advanced tactics that we use and we show on this channel. And I've kind of alluded to it on other episodes, you know, we're focusing on other things, but actually I think it deserves an episode all by itself, just so you've got the absolute basics down. And also I'm going to show you some ways you can stop your opponent doing it to you as well. And I've got to say guys, sorry I haven't put out a video the last couple of weeks. I'm afraid work got in the way of my 40k life, which is an absolute terrible thing to happen, as I'm sure you're all aware, but let's just hope it doesn't happen again in the future. So let's run through this. So we've got our unit of Dark Angels Terminators over here, and they're going to do their best not to be shot at by these Chaos Obliterators over here. And they're going to try and pin these units in combat. And I'm just going to go over a few of the different ways you can do it and some of the nuances. So this is the basic concept here, guys, and this is what you're aiming for, is you want an alive model of your opponents pinned in on three sides here, like you can see what these Terminators have done. So this model here can't actually move out of combat in his own turn because he can't move through models because the gaps here aren't wide enough for him to get through. So you base the model on three sides in a triangle. So that's what you're aiming for here, guys. Now, as you can appreciate, the things you want to pin in combat, like cultists, die really easily. So there's actually a lot of work you've got to do to actually get in a situation where you've got an alive enemy at the end of the turn, keeping usually your very powerful combat unit pinned in combat so it can't get shot the next turn. So let me run you through a couple of examples and you'll see the little nuances to this. Now guys, I can't stress enough how powerful this tactic is. This will win you games. If you can master this, if you can see the opportunities to do it, it will win you games, hands down. So the first way of doing it, guys, and this is how most people do it, is that essentially you're aiming to pin this one little cultist over here in combat. Now these Dark Angels have charged in. They've charged in against the unit over here, and they've got within an inch of it. Now in their charge move, they have not got within an inch of this unit. They've stayed just over an inch away, but they've kept within their 2 inches coherency. So the importance of this, by not declaring the unit you're going to pin in combat, is that you can't ever kill it. So now, when I pile in these units here, I pile in here, and I pile in here. So now that when I pile in, and obviously I do some attacks over there, when I actually pile in, I've locked this unit in combat. Now I can't attack this unit, even though I'm within an inch of it, because I didn't declare it when I charged in. So I have to stay an inch away when I charge, but when I pile in, it's all fair game. I just can't kill anything. So that's really, really important, because you're going to be doing your absolute hardest not to kill this unit. Because as soon as you start taking off models from the cultist unit, they're going to start failing morale, then they'll pull the one that you've tried to pin in combat, and it's all a bit embarrassing if you try and do something fancy or you just fall flat on your face trying to do it. So that's what most people do. They declare a target, and they purposely don't declare the target they're going to pin. Now the important thing here, guys, is that the only really free-form movement you get is when you actually charge. So when you charge, you make sure that this guy here is the closest model. So when these guys pile in, they can pile in closer to him. If you end up with this guy being the closest unit over here, then the whole thing falls apart. So it's really important when you're charging in, you set yourself up for this. So the second idea behind pinning is if you're running a horde and you're trying to pin one model in combat. Now, these cultists, they're not particularly strong. We're going to assume the one big unit here. Now they're trying to pin this Deathwing Knight in combat because he hasn't got that many attacks. He's only going to kill 2 or 3 a turn, so it's fine. So when we do this, the cultists, they may actually kill this dude. So they've got to be really, really careful. There's 20 of them here. They've got to be careful that they don't accidentally kill him in combat, because even a cultist can. My Terminators die to cultists all the time. So the thing to remember here, guys, is that one model has to end up incoherent. It has to end up within an inch of this Deathwing Knight. Now, there's a difference between who can fight and your model coherency. So models can only fight if they're within an inch of a model which is an inch of someone. Now these guys here are just over an inch away because unit coherency is actually up to 2 inches. So you can all stay in coherency around this guy. One model can fight, ensuring you don't kill him. Now guys, you can even use your AP dash attacks here. If you've looked in the FAQs, you don't even have to use your weapon. So if these cultists had some crazy power swords or something like that, then you know, you could make sure you just use your fists instead, just ensuring you don't kill this Terminator, because everyone knows Terminators love to die. So you do your attack with your one guy, then everyone else piles in to be within an inch afterwards. So you've completely surrounded that model, and that's how hordes normally do that. More elite armies, they do more the sort of the first example that I showed you. So guys, now we've learned how to do this right, let's talk about how you can do it wrong and some of the pitfalls to it. So I think first of all, remember morale. You know, if you've shot at a unit, don't choose it to try and pin. Don't choose it, you know, as a target of the thing you're going to pin, because it's going to go wrong. This unit of cultists, they're going to start removing models, the ones you've pinned in with your little triangles. So all of a sudden you won't have pinned it in at all. Also, talking about removing models, remember that there's things in the game which can remove themselves from play and be put down somewhere else. So, like, I chose these cultists for a reason. Now, these guys can use Tide of Traitors. They can move themselves. They can essentially redeploy themselves on the edge of a board, so they can just suddenly jump out of combat and do that. Grey Knights, if you can ever see them in the competitive scene, they can Gate of Infinity. And there's other little ones around there, like the Dark Matter Crystal for Zangors and things like that. So there's things out there, and it's just to be aware of them. Also, don't pin things which can fly. I know it sounds obvious, but I just thought I should mention it. So this is probably the most common pitfall that I see people make, and that is using injured models when you're pinning units. So this Deathwing Knight here, he's injured. He's on 1 wound. Now, we've pinned this cultist in combat. Now it's your cultist's turn to pile in and fight back. Now, because I've used this Deathwing Knight here in the actual pin, because he's wounded, any wounds that I take from this combat have to go on to the wounded model. So all of a sudden you can find that you just take 1 wound with a Terminator, and all of a sudden your whole tactic's fallen apart. So guys, don't use your wounded models if you have any choice. Just don't use them in the pin. Just use the guy who wasn't wounded. And it's a really, really easy thing to forget. So what can you do yourself to stop yourself getting pinned? Now, I think the first thing to do is say, you can see when it's going to come. So if you're playing against an Orc Horde, for example, don't use one little unit of cultists here and just run them up the middle of the board, because the Orc Horde's just going to surround them, and then you're not going to be able to shoot the Orc Horde. So, you know, just feeding your opponent units like that he can easily do that on, that's a mistake. The other thing is, guys, you know, your opponent, most of the time when they're playing elite armies, just like I covered at the start of the video, they're going to want to declare 1 unit and charge another unit, you know, so that they can't kill it. So if you position your 2 units here and here, you're setting yourself up to be pinned. Your units want to be far away from each other if they're playing a combat army, so that they can't do this. And also, pay attention, one of these units here is set up really well to stop themselves being pinned, so they're in a little group like this. And if you're only up against 5 Terminators, they're not actually going to be able to get their bases round these cultists here to actually pin them in combat. Not without killing a few of them. And like I said, as soon as you start killing cultists, they fail the morale, and then the whole pinning thing just falls apart anyway. So if you deploy your unit like this is a really bad way, and the Deathwing Knight's going to easily move around this and form a little triangle around any single one of these. Whereas this unit here, nice and tight, they're really going to struggle doing that. So I think the next counter to being pinned is spotting when it's going to happen. Such as this case here, we have a whole bunch of cultists here. They're trying to charge this last remaining Deathwing Knight to make sure they don't get shot next turn. Now, this one cultist within an inch. Everyone else is just outside an inch over here. So this one cultist is going to be the only one who's attacking. Now, assume he attacks somewhere else with another unit first of all in this fight phase. You can combat interrupt with your last remaining Deathwing Knight. Now, you can do one of two things here. Either you can try and suicide your Deathwing Knight by piling him in this way and messing up his carefully laid plan so that all of these guys round here now can fight. That's plan one. Plan two is that you could move the other way round to here, like this, where your pile ins and consolidates, so that actually he's now not set up at all to try and pin you in combat. And depending on exactly where he's positioned his models, how many of them there are and how many models you've got, one of those two options is probably going to be the way forwards. So if you like what you've seen here, guys, consider subscribing to the channel. We should have regular tactics videos coming. And if you think I've missed anything, if you think you've got a cheeky little trick on how to pin units in combat, let me know.